Well, it is official. Boeing has cut its dividend. All right, they have completely suspended their dividend until further notice. No real timetable on the plate here. Not necessarily saying what. So this leaves investors questioning: will this pandemic cause companies to cut dividends? Is this a reason for companies to quit paying dividends entirely? Well, I think it'll certainly be an interesting case-by-case basis. We'll get into Boeing specifically at the end because they're one of the first companies to actually announce a dividend cut. So we'll get into that, and then we will talk about some other things. So really my main thing here, what I want to mention just to begin with, there absolutely will be companies that are cutting dividends more than just Boeing. Now, a lot of these companies, a vast majority of them, will not completely cut the dividend like Boeing. Boeing is a very specific case, and I will get into Boeing's case. But there will be other companies that absolutely will cut their dividend. By what amount? It all depends really based off the company. So, one main thing about dividends is it really depends on the financial health of the company, and this is why researching the balance sheet is so essential. So companies who have a large cash position on their balance sheet are really well positioned for times like this. They can continue to pay a dividend out because they have a good cash balance. Companies that have a struggling balance sheet, well, frankly, that dividend is going to be harder to pay out, and they likely will cut it. So it also depends really, in this case specifically, it'll be dependent on sector. So you have companies that are somewhat, let's say, resilient. I would say resilient to even any recession type, not only just this pandemic type, but a recession type. So there's companies right now that are completely out of business entirely. You have your cruise lines, your hotels, stuff like that. Not hotels necessarily, but casinos. These are type of companies that are entirely out of business. They absolutely are out of business completely. There's nothing they can do really to grow revenue for the most part, or really make any revenue even. So those type of companies, the only way they can consistently pay their dividend from here until we get some recovery and we're actually not closing everything down, the only way they can do that is with a strong balance sheet. But unfortunately, I think a lot of those type of companies will be temporarily cutting their dividends. So with a situation like this, it's so unprecedented. You don't necessarily expect something like this to happen. So this isn't necessarily saying a company's going to cut their dividend permanently. In my opinion, the dividend cuts that will happen will be temporary ones that likely will be placed back in a year. If the company is in good health, it'll be placed back within a year. Back to my point on resilient stocks. So you think about companies that are quote-unquote essential. Think about a company like Walmart. So if we look at Walmart's dividend history, they started paying a dividend in 2003. Since then, they have grown non-stop, consistently grown their dividend. And this is through, that's right, the 2009 financial crisis. They grew their dividend, actually. A time in which companies were fearing. A lot of companies cut dividend during that time. But there are some more besides Walmart. So I'd like to introduce you to, the dividend aristocrats. The dividend aristocrats are stocks that have raised their dividend for over 25 consecutive years. So you have companies like 3M, Aflac, AT&T, AbbVie, Abbott Laboratories, Air Products and Chemicals, A.O. Smith, and there are 57 stocks right now that are currently following this. So Archer, Daniels, Midland, Automatic Data Processing, Becton, Dickinson and Company, Brown-Forman, Cardinal Health, Caterpillar, Chevron, Chubb, Cincinnati Financial, Cintas, Clorox, Coca-Cola, Colgate-Palmolive, Consolidated Edison, Dover, Ecolab, Emerson Electric, ExxonMobil, Federal Realty Investment Trusts, Franklin Resources, General Dynamics, Genuine Parts, Hormel Foods, Illinois Tool Works, Johnson & Johnson, Kimberly-Clark, Leggett & Platt, Lind, Lowe's, McCormick, McDonald's, Medtronic, Nucor, PPG Industries, Pentair, People's United Financial, PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, Roper Technologies, S&P Global, Sherwin-Williams, Stanley Black & Decker, Cisco, T. Rowe Price, Target, United Technologies, VF Corp, that's right, Walgreens Boots Alliances, Walmart, and W.W. Grainger. So, crazy stuff, right? These are all, a lot of these companies are ones you know. You probably know and love, but you don't know the dividend history of these companies. Needless to say, I have a lot of these companies in my portfolio, and there's a good reason for it. The fact that they have been through, I mean, we're talking 25 years out. They've been through minimum two recession financial crises. This makes a third. And they've still managed to keep their dividend. So that means this company is really good at managing cash, really smart with their money, and they always have extra cash to pay their shareholders regardless of the situation. So these are good stocks that I think make up a basis of a portfolio. And you can get very diversified, even just with just these stocks listed here. They're very diversified. There's a lot from a lot of different sectors. Pretty much every sector you could think of, there's a stock for it on here. It's impressive stuff. Very impressive. From there, we talk about the dividend kings. These are the guys that's right, they've increased their dividend for 50 plus years. And obviously the ones we saw on that list too, they're on here as well. But there's just only really 28 companies that are on the dividend king list at the moment. So 28 companies, and you saw them before. Good companies like Coca-Cola, Lowe's, Colgate, Target. Target's a big one too, obviously. These are companies that have proven themselves that they can consistently raise a dividend no matter what faces them. And frankly, that is a good idea for an investment of a portfolio, especially in times like this where stocks are down so cheap. You should look into these stocks. Look at dividend kings, dividend aristocrats, because they're a good basis. These are companies that you don't have to fear about dividend cuts. So yes, to end this, obviously there will be cuts in dividends by certain companies. And I certainly know there are some in my portfolio that will be taking cuts. And I think I'm okay with it. I trust the financial process of the business. I think they're doing well. And I do think overall these cuts will be temporary. But in a case of a company like Boeing. So I think this whole thing is pretty convenient for Boeing. Boeing is a company that was really, frankly, running out of money. They were a complete disaster. They are a complete disaster of a company. They're run very poorly. They've had nothing but nightmares with the 737 MAX, crashes. Just horrible leadership really led to a lot of bad things for this company. And frankly, they were going to have to cut their dividend this year anyways. They were going to have to cut it. Not necessarily entirely, but I think this is a fantastic excuse for them to just completely wipe that out. I think it works well for them, and they're going to play it off as if it's entirely based off of this pandemic. It frankly wasn't. The company did not have money to pay out what they were paying out. It just didn't. So Boeing's a special case. You'll find that with some other companies too. They'll justify dividend cuts based off this. What you need to know is you need to look at the financials of the company. If the balance sheet is good, trust that company. If it's a dividend aristocrat, trust that company that they're not going to cut that dividend. I'm not going to say where the capital appreciation necessarily is of the stock. Is the stock going to go up, down? I can't give you that. But they've had a proven track record they can grow dividend. So if you're looking for safe dividend investments, you want to start with that dividend aristocrat list or the dividend king list. Those are the guys to start with. From there, you can develop a portfolio. That's my opinion on the matter. Dividend cuts will happen, and I hope you expect it, but I do think it'll be a temporary thing.